Hello friends! Today we're going to be working on the Module 4 study guide. There was a lot of confusion in class yesterday, so I'm hoping that we can clear some of that up today. So check your answers along with me. If you don't understand why I did something, then that's a great time to maybe rewind, watch it again, check out your answers, and then you can always raise your hand and I will be available to help, as will Miss Allen and Miss Veronique. So you've got all three of us here today to help you work through this. All right. So the first problem that we have here is a plot line. Now, I think some people were fooled because this looks a lot like a ruler. And so what we have to understand is that a ruler is very simply a number line. And those number lines can represent anything. In this case, this is representing gallons. So for example, this would be 1 gallon. This would be 2 gallons. 3 gallons. And so we have to get it out of our mind that anytime we see a number line that has these little tick marks, that this is a ruler. It is a ruler, but it's not a ruler in the way that we're used to thinking of rulers. It's a way of stretching our brain. And so we really have to pay attention to the label that tells us what it is that this number line represents. So that was the first thing that we needed to do, was kind of figure out what we're looking at here. So now I'm going to come up to the problem. Jill collected honey from 9 different beehives and recorded the amount collected in gallons from each hive on the line plot shown. So she had 9 different beehives. If I look, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The X's are the different beehives. So this is how much she got from each of those beehives. It says she wants to write the value of each point marked on the number line above points A through D in terms of the largest possible whole number of gallons, quarts, and pints. Use the line plot above to fill in the blanks with the correct conversions. All right, and it tells us that the first one is done for us. So to help me better understand what's going on, I'm going to come back up to my number line. It says here that it's 0 gallons. Okay, well that makes sense because here's A and here's 1 gallon and it's not 1 gallon, so that makes sense that it's 0 gallons. All right, the next thing I've got to look at is it says that it's 3 quarts. So here I have to know my conversions. So in 1 gallon, there is 4 quarts. In every quart, there is 2 pints. That means that it takes 2, 4, 6, 8 pints to equal a gallon, okay? So this right here would be 8 pints. If I look, this is 1 pint, 2 pint, 3 pints, 4 pints, 5 pints, 6 pints, 7 pints. And then 1 whole would be 8 over 8 pints. So that takes care of the pints. But how did they get 3 quarts? Well, 1 pint, 2 pints. That line there would be 1 quart. The next 2 pints would be 2 quarts. The next 2 points, that line right there where that X is, that means that that is 3 quarts. So that's where that 3 is coming from. You have to break this number line into gallons, pints, and quarts. So you got to take a minute to do that or you're going to get really confused. And so it tells me that it's looking for the largest possible whole number of gallons, quarts, and pints. So for this one here, my answer is 3. Now, let's look at B. Point B is right here. So it's past 1, but it's not quite 2. So how many whole gallons do we have? We have 1. It's not asking, there's 2 X's, it's not getting into that yet. It's just saying point B right here, how much is that? So it's definitely 1 whole gallon. Now, I could check to see quarts are bigger than pints, so that's what I'm aiming for because I want to get the biggest amount possible. So that's why up here, I could have also said that it was the same thing as 6 pints, but since quarts are bigger, I'm going to use that bigger conversion. I'm going to say it's 3. So I'm going to do what I did here. I'm going to say this is 1 quart. This is 2 quarts. So if I look, that falls on one of those even lines again. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's going to give me 2 quarts. And since I've used quarts, I'm not going to use pints here. All right, now I'm going to come to point C. Point C is just past 2 whole gallons. So I know that I have 2 whole gallons. Now, if you look at where my X is, it takes 2 of these, 2 pints, to make a quart. And I don't have a quart. So I can't use that. I have 0 quarts. What I do have, though, is that X is above that first line, which we decided back here was pints. So that would be 1 pint. Then I come over here to D. Here's 3, so I'm not there yet. So I still have 2 whole gallons. Okay. And then let's see, I circled 2. So there's 2 pints. So that's 1 quart. There's 2 quarts. And I don't have enough to make 3 quarts because my X's, my point D, doesn't involve both of those. It just involves the first. So here I've made 1 quart, 2 quarts, and then I have 1 pint that I used. And so this is really just about being able to do these conversions on a number line. It's not something that we're used to doing. We're used to writing out those mathematical equations and using the conversion factors, but tonight for this problem is just a matter of being able to read a number line. So I hope that helped a little bit. Now it says find the total amount of honey collected from the 5 hives that produce the most honey. Okay, so I know up here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 5 hives. So that's that part, the 5 hives. And that's the highest number. So I've also got the most. So this is what I'm looking at, point D. I have to put all of those together to figure out how much honey they got from those hives. So I decided that there is 8 little lines in here, right? Because it takes 8 pints to make a quart, or 8 pints to make a gallon. So I'm going to count. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the mark is 5 out of 8. So that's what I'm going to use here because that would be my measurement, and I have 2 holes. Now, that's the measurement of 1x, but I actually have 5 x's. So I could add 2 5/8 plus 2 5/8 plus 2 5. That's a whole lot of adding. So I'm going to be a little bit more efficient here. And what I'm going to do is I know that if I multiply with a fraction and a whole number that I'm just going to multiply straight across. So I'm going to get rid of this mixed number here, and I'm going to turn it into an improper fraction. So I'm going to take 2 times 8, that's 16, plus 5, that gives me 21, and my denominator stays the same. And I'm going to multiply that by 5. I want that to be a fraction, so it's 5 over 1. All right. Now, when I multiply this, I get 105 over 8. And so now I have to do that long division that everybody hates. All right. If I have 1/100ths block, I cannot pull out 8 blocks and make a group because that thing is one huge block. So I have to take that one huge block and I have to break it into 10 sticks. And when I do that, I have 10 sticks. And I can pull out one group of 8. When I do that, I use 8 of the rods or 8 of the sticks, and I'm going to have 2 left over. Now I can't make a group of 8 with those 2 10 sticks, but I can take those 10 sticks and I can bust them into ones. And I already had 5 ones here. So that would give me altogether 25 ones. So now I've got to figure out if I have 25, how many groups of 8 can I make? And I'm sorry, this fell very poorly here. So that denominator up there was 8. So this is going to go 3 times. 3 times 8 is 24, and then I have a remainder of 1. So I've got to figure out what the question was asking me and how to answer this. So it's asking me to look for the total amount of honey collected. So since I have 13 holes, that tells me that I'm going to have 13 gallons, and then I have a remainder of 1. Well, it wouldn't be 1 gallon left over. It would be 1 of the 8. So that would give me 13 gallons, and 1 of the 8 lines would be 1 pint. So my answer here is 13 gallons and 1 pint. This problem was particularly hard. I had to really think about this. I couldn't even think about it on the spot in class today. I had to come home and sit where it was nice and quiet, like we talk about so often, and be able to wrap my brain around this. So remember, when we're in class and there are people who are working, if the teacher needs to have some quiet to be able to figure these problems out, then pretty much everybody in the class does. So that's one of the reasons it's important that we stay focused and we stay on task, because other people are really struggling. And a lot of people want to get the work done. I know we all struggle, but there are people who are trying to persevere and push through it. And it's really frustrating when you've got people all around you talking and being loud. So that's one of the reasons that it's important that we're working hard and quietly. Okay, I'm going to zoom in here. Now, for number 2, a lot of you all had the idea of putting the numbers here and adding up the edges. Well, that works if you're trying to find the perimeter. Because if you add all of these together, that just tells me the distance around the outside of the square, right? Like if I said we're going to sit on the perimeter of the carpet, we all sit on the outside edge. But what I need to know is the area, and that means all of this in here. And the way that we find area is we take the length and we multiply it times the width. And so in this case, I have 2 fractions already. I have 7/8, and I'm going to multiply that by 2/7. Now, I can do this a couple of different ways. If you can look at this and simplify here. 7 goes into 7 one time. So I'm going to cross those out and I'm going to make each of those a 1. 2 goes into 2 one time and it goes into 8 4 times. Now when I solve the problem, I'm just left with 1/4. So if you're confused by that, let me show you what it looks like if I don't do it like that. I still set it up the same, and this time I get 14 over 56. I noticed today a lot of you tried to reduce by 2, which is fine. A lot of you tried to reduce by 7, which is fine. So let's reduce it by 7, just because it's bigger. 14 goes into 7 2 times. 7 goes into 7 goes into 14 2 times. 7 goes into 56 8 times. But I can still reduce it by 2 here. And when I do, guess what I get? 1/4. So if I can save myself a couple of steps and simplify, remember it has to be the guy across from it, kind of like the butterfly, then I'm being more efficient because I'm saving these steps down here. So my answer for 2 is 1/4. All right, so let's take a look at number 3. This also threw a lot of people. I was so happy to see that most of you recognize that 6 times 4 equals 24. So a lot of you knew that that A was going to have something to do with 4. But if I just put 4 in, 24 times 4 means that I have 24 4 times. And when I add 24 4 times, I get 92. So that cannot be right. It cannot be 4. So you have to think, if you have a whole number and you're multiplying it by something to make it smaller, you have to multiply it by a fraction. So if I know that there's going to be a 4 in my fraction and I know it's going to have a 1, I only have 2 choices. So I'm going to figure out which works best. If I just make it 4 over 1, all I've done is the same thing because I would multiply straight across and I would still get 24 times 4 over 1. So that can't be it. So I'm going to try 1/4 and see what happens. 24 over 1 times 1/4. I multiply straight across. I get 24 over 4. That's improper. So I say 4 goes into 24 6 times, which is my answer. So that means that it has to be a fraction, 1/4. So you just got to think. Sometimes we get so caught up in the math that we don't think about taking that extra step that a good mathematician takes and says, does that make sense? All right, what does 2 over 3 really mean? And then in parentheses it says equation. That means it wants you to write the number sentence. So a lot of you put 2 out of 3, which I guess is correct. That was your initial understanding. That was the schema that you brought with you to 5th grade. But this year we've learned that that fraction symbol really means division. And so if you remember, I taught you very early on, and it's also hanging on an anchor chart over on our math board, that A over B is the same thing as A divided by B. Well, that's not really my equation. It doesn't really tell me what this means. So what I do then is I just plug in the numbers. So that really means 2 divided by 3. Doesn't say solve, doesn't say evaluate, it just